Welcome back to UnCeiling You. Today's episode is one I've been looking forward to because we're talking about something every high-achieving leader struggles with at some point. The shift from surviving to truly leading. And joining me is someone who understands this transformation better than anyone else, Walter Dussendroop, also known as the Dutch Mentor. Walter has spent over 30 years as an executive coach and now devotes his time to mentoring professionals who want to grow, lead, and thrive without burning themselves out. What I love about Walter is how grounded his wisdom is, rooted in real stories, real mistakes, and real transformations. His work helps people not just succeed professionally, but become stronger, steadier, and more self-aware leaders along the way. So if you've been rushing, reacting, or feeling like you're holding it all together with grit and hope, this conversation is going to bring you clarity, calm, and direction. Let's dive in. Walter, thank you so much for joining me on UnCeiling You. I'm really excited to have you here to talk about the topic of mentoring. Let me ask you, what's the first step someone should take when they want to move from a situation where they feel like they're just surviving to where they're thriving, especially in high-pressured career situations?
Well, nothing better than a great question right out of the gate. Natalie, thank you for inviting me to come on today to talk about this topic that I feel very passionate about. Of course, everything comes from deep experience. As an executive leader in the industry for over 30 years and now full-time mentoring, I always go back to where, what happened to me. It's such a pivotal moment in my life that I say, hey, why did I need to go get a mentor? What took place? Many people who are really good in technical way or doing what they are doing on the entry level who get promoted into leadership fall into the valley of despair, meaning that they transition from doing to leading, but they don't really know and understand what leading is. So they end up scrambling and doing more and leading less, and often they don't get the support. And that's exactly what I experienced as an executive, as a junior manager going up the rank. Now, I was fortunate enough that I had one person who was very insightful and really was ahead of his time and provided really good mentorship. So that was my first mentor, somebody who I could lean on, somebody who was speaking from deep personal experiences. And that has then translated throughout my entire career that I did not have to wait for somebody to come to me, but I had to be in charge of my career, my progression, my lessons that I needed to learn both the easy and the hard way, but always involving a mentor, somebody I could speak to either on a professional level, on a voluntary level in the institution, or even go beyond it and hiring somebody that can function as a mentor and as an accountability buddy. And that has really been, so no different than Alcoholics Anonymous. The first thing we need to do is we need to admit that we should not be doing this alone, that we have a problem, we're not making progress, we should seek some assistance. And that's really what I experience and what I advocate for people to see for themselves, so raising self-awareness.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the specific story, especially of you getting to that next level and then feeling like wait, I'm trying to do it all and I need to be learning to lead. Can you share with me a story of someone that you mentored and you helped them make that shift?
Yeah, sure. Of course. I mean, there are many people along the way, but a couple of them people stand out, right? Is that where you see this diamond in the rough, the people who really have the potential, but don't understand quite how to put it all together in order to be able to get to the next level. And they come with great energy and great intentions, but those intentions, if not polished, if not delivered in a way, can actually become career stoppers. So I had a young manager, a belly full of fire, really a phenomenal technician, had shifted into a managerial role, but then continued to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week doing two jobs. She was continue to do her job that she was doing before she got promoted and then struggling to lead. And it wasn't until we started working together, I said, listen, there's a better way of doing it. Having a work-life balance is critically important because otherwise you will burn out and you will definitely burn the people out who are working for you. Yes. So it is through the guidance of showing what it actually means to delegate responsibilities as a doer back to the people who should be doing it now, that she opened up her eyes and said, wow, right? And that was a hard lesson to be learned because you need to place trust in people. And you need to learn that it is okay for others to take on a task and learn to fail along the way. And for high potential, high performing people, that is very difficult to do, right? They want everything to be just perfect. Since that day, she has gone up the rank multiple levels and is actually functioning as an AVP right now and doing phenomenally well. This stories like that I use, and people need to see that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, I don't know, and it's okay to ask for help.
There you go. I'm glad that you were able to share the story and put it all together and repeat the first step so it didn't go away too fast. Now, another thing that you like to talk about is the power of responding instead of reacting. And so many of us struggle with that, especially when we're under pressure. And we may be putting extra pressure on ourselves to be perfect, and then therefore that pressure onto their team. So, what does it truly mean to respond with intention? And how can someone train themselves to do this consistently?
Yeah, so first thing we need to do is come to the realization of how the brain actually functions, right? Is that, and without going to the neuroscience of it, I'll break it up into very simple components. We have an upper brain that allows us to be responsive and that we can process information, that can formulate a thought, and we can weigh the options before we actually give a response back. Our lower brain, which is more of that reactive, that fight for flight, that I want to give that instantaneous answer or I want to do this instantaneous action without really putting deep thought into it. So I always encourage people that write, on a post-it note, write on your screen, so something you can remember at all times. E for events will happen, plus R, we have now a choice to either react or to respond, equals O, which is the outcome. So after every event, no matter if you react or respond, there is an outcome. The problem is that if you react, the outcome is most likely less likely to be the one that you really wanted to go after. So we need to learn to say, listen, we need to slow down. And that can be a microsecond of slowing down. And I'll give you an example in a second. Or you might want to be able to say, listen, I don't know. Let me look into this and I'll get back to you. And just those words, I don't know, let me research, I'll get back to you, is extremely difficult to say for people who are high performing and they want to make an impression on people around them that they know it all or have this false sense that they need to know it all. So again, it goes back to raising self-awareness, understanding self, that it is okay to say, no, I don't know. Let me look into it, right? The imposter, that new junior leader that has just been promoted from doing to leading, often suffers from imposter. Well, the imposter wants to give the answer because they want to continue to perform at a high level while they still don't have the chops, right? They don't have the deeper understanding. Especially those people need to be guided and mentored and coached to say it is quite okay to say, I don't know, let me look into it. So that's the responding part. Of course, the reacting part. Now, as a paramedic for over 30 years, and that's my first love, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, I think, is that I love taking care of patients, right? It was my driving force, my why, my purpose. Well, if somebody drops in front of me from a cardiac arrest, I have two opportunities. I can react or I can respond. If I react by just going down and do what I know how to do, airway, breathing, circulation, mouth to mouth, and CPR, that is fine. That certainly will have an outcome. But the problem is that if I did not survey the scene and make an assessment if this patient was safe to work on, in other words, preventing myself or others to get sick from that patient, that's the difference between reacting and responding. Even in the most urgent situations, we need to take a little bit of time to process the things around us before we make the right decision for you and for the people that you're trying to help or whatever it is you're trying to resolve.
What a concrete example of someone going into cardiac arrest, because I'm sure that fight or flight is right there. Like, it's up to me to rescue the situation. Can you tell me a time when in your career when you reacted instead of responded? What did you learn and how did it shape you as a mentor today?
So I think that goes directly to my why. And that really led me. So I was riding my bicycle in Holland when I was about 14 years old. And in front of me, there was an older farmer who crossed the road and got hit by a car. And he lay dying on the ground. And instead of me thinking about what other implications could this have, I rushed over to him and held him in my arms. And I literally put my fingers into his skull, which was, dangerous on many different points. But I also had so that I reacted to that, right? There's the only thing I knew how to do. I was, from that limbic brain, from that fight for flight. But also at that moment of time, I was not able to help him. I didn't know what to do. So at that moment, I had this moment, this epiphany that I wanted to be in healthcare. I wanted to learn to never be in that situation again. I wanted to learn how to take care of people in
Mm.
case of any kind of an emergency. And that has been the driving force in my life ever since. How can I help people initially? And of course, as I got older and I had more responsibilities and more kids who needed to go to college, I really shifted to how can I become a leader of people who can take care of people. And that has been very impactful. But the true sense throughout that whole sense is that I started off by reacting and not knowing what to do. Now I have learned how to respond to things, basing it on deep personal experiences, including from time to time say, I don't know. Let me look into it. I'll get back to you today, tomorrow, or next week.
And I think that there's, I'm sure, a lot of forgiveness in there because your intent was very pure. And I'm sure it drove you to say, okay, I need to learn more. So there was a little
Without a
bit of
doubt.
forgiveness.
Without a doubt. I mean, you have a little bit of that feeling of like, did I do the right thing? Did I, because I put my hands into, essentially speaking, into his cranial cavity, did I cause an infection? Is he going to die from that, right? So it's all these
Right.
thoughts after, but again, once you process those things, what I did was the right thing, right? So the
Yes.
outcome would have been the same no matter what I did. He was going to die.
Right.
Well, the ultimate outcome is that I was able to process that, and it's been the driving force in my life to try to help people on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And sometimes when we're dealing with people that have audacious dreams and that sort of thing, and we'll also get into the why, people feel that they have a need to stand out, but few know how to do it in a sustainable way. And at the same time, if you're introverted, sometimes standing out is very difficult for you. What advice do you give to people who want to differentiate themselves from a crowd without burning out or losing their values?
So a great question. It is about the word differentiating. And so when I start working with new clients, I always start at the beginning of their why. And interesting, when I talk about what is your purpose, what is your passion, what is your people and process that you want to work with, the four P's, most of them will tell me what they do and how they do it, but they really don't understand why they do it. So
Mm.
as we start digging deeper into what the why is, was there a traumatic event? Was there an interesting event? Something that stands out? Right from that point, I teach them how to tell a story about themselves. Now, if they go in for an interview and they tell the same story like everybody else, I'm a great person, I come on time, I work hard, I see the future, I'm good with numbers. The other 20 people said the exact same thing, so you're not going to be memorable. Right? So the first thing what they need to learn is that how do I differentiate from others? And that is by building a personal brand. Now, part of that personal brand is becoming very reflective, and that is utilizing your people around you, people above you, to the side of you, and your subordinates by asking, what is something that I'm really good at? Now, if you ask 10, 15 people and you get 4 or 5 responses saying, I'm a great communicator, now that becomes your differentiating strength, your superpower. And that is something you need to learn to talk about in a way that adds value to whatever it is that you're going to be doing going forward. And making the connection of your why, your purpose and passion, learning how to apply that to the people and process that you want to work with, leveraging your super strength in that, you can now really show an organization or a team how you can add value, right? How can you help them advance towards the ultimate North Star that they have set for the organization itself? Now, you asked the underlying question, what about that introvert? What about the extrovert? Well, the thing is that we are all individuals, right? So I work, pro bono with some neurodiverse clients, and they are some of the most brilliant people I get to work with, right? But they have a really hard time telling their story. So we have to come up with their story that makes sense in a way that they can articulate it, and then try to put some nuggets in there that make sense, how they can add value to an organization. But it needs to be in their language that they speak, not what Walter speaks or what Natalie speaks. And it is the same thing for the introvert and the extrovert, is that we cannot treat everybody the same. We need to take each person as its own being and shape a message that represents their personal brand. Now, when it comes down to an introvert, now, interesting enough, I am an introvert, but I'm an applied extrovert. So I've learned over time to put myself in front of crowds of 100, 200, 500 people and speak. I get no energy from that at all. It actually caused me great anxiety. I get palpitations, but I do it well because I've learned how to do it over time. So if I work with an introvert, then I just really, how can we build up the capacity to have some extrovert qualities that the person can be comfortable with over a period of time, so it's not going to hold them back. It's not going to be a career stopper for them. And that is, again, it's individualized care. There's no one way for everybody, right? It is everybody is its own little being, and we need to shape around that in order to get them to advance and go on their journey, reaching their dreams.
Can you share a story of someone who really stood out for you where they shared their why and what can we learn from that?
So I'll generalize because a lot of the nurses have that. So I work with a lot of nurse leaders, new nurse leaders. Clearly, all had somewhere along the way, and something happened in their life with their mom and dads, their aunts and uncles, their brothers and sisters, even themselves, that they found a connection to healthcare. And then from that, they went on a path to becoming a clinician, doctor, nurse, but it doesn't make a difference. The stories are very alike, some variability in there. But the key is that now that they have become leaders, they need to make connections to the people that they lead, right? And because you have to build trust. And trust is the one non-negotiable. Now, the thing is that a lot of these technical people, doctors, nurses, who go through this process are not making the connections necessary to be able to accelerate the performance of their teams. And that is where they need to learn how to relate to people. And that's where they need to learn how to lead people. And that is by going out and meeting with people, loving the people that they lead, getting to know them on a deeper level, getting to understand what their intrinsic value is of the people that they lead, rather than just leading it from what I know, what I think needs to be done. So the connection of the why into the connection of the what and how, then executing it in order to build relationships into partnerships. And it's when you go from those stepping blocks to a partnership where you can start accelerating as a team. So those are the connective pieces
I see.
that you. And sometimes, by the way, this can take weeks or months for people to get there. Sometimes you feel like you're more like a psychologist by really pulling it out of people, right? And they say, well, what is the underlying cause? What is the underlying why that makes you who you are today? Because once people understand that, they can feel that the empathy, the ability to relate to somebody goes up. Once they can relate to you, they're more likely to perform for you.
Gotcha. So now we're really stepping into that why, and you're emphasizing the importance of starting with the why. And it seems like it's easy to say, but how does someone, and you said it takes weeks and months sometimes to find the why. I'm also curious, like, how do you get someone to realize their why and not question their why?
Interesting enough, I've had a couple people, younger people who were in medical school, and they wanted to. I was working with them, and their why had nothing to do with medicine. They actually both of them, their why was really in information technology and IT. But they were in medicine because mom and dad made them go into medicine. So they were pretending their why was to take care of people, what their real why was. So, so there are some complexities there. The key thing is when you start working with people around their why is to give them time, room, and space. So one of the things I'll tell people is that, what is your big dream? And let's say they are a nurse or a doctor or an administrator, and they tell you their big dream is to open up a health clinic in Jamaica, or to become a massage therapist, or own be an entrepreneur, which is completely different from where they are today. First thing I said, well, no, let's come back to where the goal for me as a mentor to helping them find a why is to make sure that they get to express what it is that they want to do, not anybody else, not what
Yeah.
other people have seen. So it is really important for people to dream big and then learn how to act small. And acting small is the operational steps you take to an end goal. But once you have a dream, I want to go back to it and say, why is that your dream? What happened in your life that makes this such a significant moment? And that really, you draw that out. Now, I try to make it a bit more fun by saying, as a leader, you have to become an effective storyteller, right? You have a short period of time to get to capture people's attention and get people to buy into what it is that you want to do. If you stand in front of people and you ramble for 10 minutes, you lose them after a minute or two. Right? So learning to tell your story, your why story in about 43 seconds. And you say, well, 43 seconds, what is that? 8-second hook, get me engaged, get me interested, 30 seconds of body, and then close it out with another 5 seconds to where we are today. By learning how to shape a story, learning with your why, and learning how to speak from your heart. So the first step is to having conversation. And I give them some video clips to look at. I give them examples. Then they write it down. Sometimes people have 4, 5, 6 pages of information. And then we start going back from the pages. We look for keywords. And from keywords, we make sentences. From sentences, we make a story. And then they learn how to speak to that story from their heart over a period of time, practicing. Somebody stops you in the hallway and say, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself. Now you have a story to tell. But because they went through this process, they can now utilize the same storytelling technique in all of the other things that they're trying to get their team members to do. And change management is one of the core components of leadership.
Yeah. Well, that's extremely concrete and very helpful. Do you remember a moment when you uncovered your own why and how it shifted your leadership and mentoring approach?
So I have had three dreams in my life, right? I wanted to be a doctor, I wanted to be a healthcare executive, and I wanted to be a pilot. So each one of them comes with a why, right? So I think I told you about my paramedic story. Now, I didn't become a doctor because there are a couple of barriers in the way, but the best outcome was I became a paramedic. I was a flight paramedic, and I really felt strongly that I've done, contributed to many people's lives in a meaningful way. So that is one. The second, the healthcare executive, didn't happen until I actually sat on the couch with another paramedic and say, we're early in the 30s, so what are we going to do next? So this job is hard. It's going to break our bodies. And that pivotal moment, I said, listen, I think that I can become a leader of leaders and get leaders to lead the front line better so the front line can take care of patients. So in other words, as a leader, I can have an impact on thousands, while as an individual care provider, I can only impact one. So I went on that. So I went back up my bachelor's, my master's, my fellowship, figured out how to start working for a local hospital, and worked up the career ladder. And then the third why is I wanted to be a pilot. As a young kid back in Holland, the NATO forces would practice their F-16s flying over my little town every Tuesdays and Thursdays. And I always looked up and, being mesmerized that I want to do that someday. So then 9/11 happened, right? I kind of forgot about it, put it on the back burner. I didn't have a lot of money for it. 9/11 happened. I responded to that. And it was a pivotal moment of saying, what am I responding to? Am I going to go home? I had to make a phone call. Say, listen, I'm responding to the city. I'm not sure I'll be home or when I will be home. And that was very deeply touching and emotional. Many changes in my life were made after that. One of which I got my pilot's license. And since, I went back and said, listen, I flew the helicopter. I really want to become a helicopter pilot. So today I'm proud to be a fixed wing pilot, and I have my teaching certificate as a helicopter pilot, so I can teach other young aviators to go on a career path, or whatever it is that they dream in that field. So the message is this: just because you have one life to live, that doesn't mean you have one why or one dream. It is
Right.
critically important, a short life that we have to live, that you pursue the things that are too deeply meaningful to you, and that could include making some pivots along the way into different career fields. Just be smart about it.
Very nice. Now, you've talked about your leadership and going up the chain of command, and you've helped shape high performing teams. What are the key elements of a high performance team? And what role does mentorship play in that?
So, mentorship plays a critical role along the way. 95% of executive leaders, most senior leaders in organizations, agree that mentorship and coaching and development of their people is critical to the success of the company. Sadly, only 5% of those actually meaningfully follow in their companies. And often, development of people, coaching, mentorship, and other things are cut out of the budget very quickly when they are short money. And I think that's a massive mistake. I think that what happens in our bachelor's degree, master's degree is great things. We become more worldly, but none of them teach you how to become a highly effective leader. So what happens in reality that most people going up the ranks are really never working at the top of their license. They really don't know how to become highly effective leaders, and they actually act like the last five leaders that they have worked for, and many of them as yellers and screamers and directive leaders, not people that really make you feel inspired and joyful to come to work for, sadly. So what I believe is that there's a simple equation that I follow, is that the high performance equals the function of trust multiplied against engagement. And trust being the non-negotiable. So one thing is that if a leader doesn't learn how to build trust with their team members, then all the other things don't really matter. Right? If there's no trust but you engage them, there's not going to be an outcome. The outcome will be there, but it's not going to be high performing. So again, the four key responsibilities of a leader is to love the people that you lead. So you need to learn how to do that effectively. And that's a
Mhm.
whole separate talk. You need to lead to context or buy-in, not control. Especially the new millennials or the Zs don't do well with people telling them what to do. You need to get them to buy into it. You need to create a safe environment. People need to feel psychologically and physically safe in the space that they work, because that's how they will innovate and create and collaborate. and you need to work with great focus. So those are the four things that if you do them well, that creates trust. Now, engagement is about making people feel part of a team. So there's a 5-step process for that. So as a leader, you have to continuously evaluate, do I have the right people in the right roles? Do they have the right skills, knowledge, and abilities? And if they don't, you as the leader have to make sure that they either get that information and get those skills and feel and make sure that they have the bandwidth to be successful, or you have to actively recruit people from the outside in order to be able to build that team. Number two is that they have to be unified, right? We need to make sure that everybody feels that there's a voice. By the end of the day, that those voices need to become one, that buy-in, right? That's something that we can rally around. That's based in trust. No trust, we can have any of this stuff. Then it is we need to learn how to measure, what we call having meaningful measures. We measure a lot of things in the world, but we don't do a good job in analyzing, or certainly we don't do a good job in taking action on that. So again, having meaningful metrics attached to the things that matter is critically important, drivers and outcomes. Then we need to have a cadence of accountability. So if the team is not accountable to self and then to team on a daily and weekly basis, performance is unlikely to be very high. And then, of course, we have to take action. We have to take meaningful action on a daily basis. And the mindset should be not let me throw mud at the wall and see what sticks, but we need to deeply understand what is that one thing, if I fix that, if I work on that, will have the greatest impact on everything else that I do. And that's really those are the key ingredients on building a high performance team. And you have to remember that trust is not built overnight, but you can accelerate it if you are very intentional and you are very inclusive and you bring people together and you inspire and motivate them. You can get across that bridge much quicker. And that's the key to success of building a high performance team. And luckily, I've built a whole bunch of them, and the performance speaks for itself.
I love the way you laid that out because it's very concise, it's very orderly. Can you tell us a story of where you tie it all together, of the 5 steps, and also making sure that you're paying attention to trust foremost really paid off?
Yeah. So I think in healthcare, I'll use that as an example, but it just comes. I have many different industries you can put this. In healthcare, for specifically, you often have an administrator, you have a nurse, and a doctor that have to work together. Now, often they work in parallel. The doctors do their thing, nurses do their thing, administrators do their thing. But the outcome that we seek is continuity of care, or seeing the maximum number of patients per day, or having improvement in cardiovascular risk registry, or diabetes, or asthma. The thing is that none of them can have an impact on any of these metrics alone. So by taking a team, and at New York City Health and Hospital, I had a team that was very much working in parallel. And it wasn't until we brought them together around a common cause that we wanted to improve very specific measures for a very specific reason that they were buying into that. And we came together as a team. We created what we call a team concord. We came up with a team name, team values, team rules, and consequences if we did not follow those rules. And then we went through a continuous steps of improvement using an A3 thinking methodology. And we were continuously checking in with each other if we were being accountable to self and to each other. And through that process, we went from almost to the bottom of 11 hospitals to almost to the top of the hospital. And actually, in one metric, we ended up outperforming Kaiser Permanente and a couple other national standouts. So it showed you that once you start working together for a common cause with great intention, when there is trust between team members, we can do extraordinary things.
Thank you so much for that example. Now, we're going to move into the questions that I have for my insider group. But before we do that, how should people go about finding you? I'll have information in the notes, but what are some of the things that you're doing to really help the folks that you're working with?
So yeah, one of my promises is to add value and quality to the people that watch and follow my stuff on a daily basis. So if you go to my LinkedIn account or my Instagram account or my YouTube account, there is a daily storytelling around a particular topic of leadership. There's a video of 1 minute or less of giving you tips and insights on how to become more effective. Now, the key thing is that I believe in action-based learning. So in any of my programs, I meet people on a weekly basis, not on a monthly basis. Every conversation leads to a singular action. The singular action takes 15 minutes a day in order to be able to build new habits and behaviors. And that's the motto that I have. It is the drip, drip, drip over a period of time by getting the proper support along the way that you too can reach whatever it is that your ultimate dream is. So yeah, go to my LinkedIn account, Walter Dusseldorp or the Dutch Mentor, and just follow me and engage yourself in conversation. Again, I enjoy being part of a larger group and having open dialogue.
Excellent. Okay, so here's your first question. What's a daily or weekly practice you use to stay mentally strong and grounded as a mentor and a leader?
I love that question because at the foundation, our mental wellness, spiritual wellness, relationship wellness, financial wellness is critically important, right? So I practice every single day. I meditate, and I recently picked up Tai Chi as another practice, and then I try to walk 3 times a week for at least 30 plus minutes. It is a combination of these things that I put on my scorecard and I hold myself accountable to. So it's on my calendar. It's a commitment that I make with regular reminders. And if I don't do this, there's a consequence that I cannot have something. And that is how I hold myself accountable to be able to make sure that I remain balanced in my mental, spiritual, physical health, as well as relationship and financial health.
Nice. What's one lesson you wish you learned earlier about building trust in professional relationships?
Yeah, so I think that one of my mentors told me, and I would have learned that many years before that, less is more. So I'm so passionate about things. Sometimes I share things, no different than what we did today. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant. So sometimes it's better to say less, which have a greater impact. And I learned over time that meetings should be no more than 30 minutes because people have time to process the information and then take an action on it rather than sitting in a meeting for 60 minutes. When I do podcasts, I usually do 20, 25 minutes or presentations because after that, our brains start fading away. So whatever you say is already lost. So yeah, less is more is a really good lesson that if I had to go back, I probably could have benefited from that many years before I actually learned about that.
Okay. Now, if someone listening wants to become a mentor, what doubts their experience or value would you say, how do you overcome any kind of doubts they might have about their experience or value? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so I think the key is to understand that you cannot be great at everything. Every one of us becomes a subject matter expert at something very, very particular. So remember, I talked about the reflective survey, finding out what your super strength is. Well, find out what your super strength is. So if you're a welder or a plumber or electrician, you have a wealth of knowledge, but there's probably one or two things you are truly an expert on. Start coaching and mentoring around that subject. No different than doctor, nurse, administrator, finance, IT. Zero into what you really know multiple levels deep and put yourself out there. We all have a story to share. Base it on experience. So a good coach asks good questions, a good listener, and will point you in the right direction. A good mentor, which I recommend people should have mentorship, draws from deep personal experiences. They can tell you about their personal pitfalls. So don't be afraid to be vulnerable as a mentor to talk about all the screw ups you have had in life, but you learn from them because you are hoping that they will have a path of somewhat lesser resistance. Again, you don't want them to not fail because failure is good too, but much can be learned from that. But I think that each one of us has a story to tell and share it with somebody, one person or two people. So on the end of the day, if you make an impact on one, no different than what we're doing today, my day is made, right? That's what
Yeah.
I live for.
Nice. Here's my last question. What's the most common blind spot you see in ambitious professionals and how can they overcome it?
I think the most common one is that self-doubt, right? Not that is the imposter syndrome. Well, I would like to do that, but I don't think I'm good enough. So low confidence. So I think there are many hidden gems, or we call them the box nine or box fives, is that people who are certainly have potential and can be performing, they just need a little bit support along the way. Now, interesting enough, women are much better at asking for support and mentorship than men. And the reason why that is because men's egos get in the way of being vulnerable and asking. Right? Denae Brown says it very clearly in her messaging. And she says is that you do not need to go at it alone. Right? So don't let that imposter syndrome, that self-doubt stand in the way. If you have a dream that goes beyond the position you're in today, seek mentorship, internal, external. Go on, join my membership program. You start and stop when you want, but that is something that will be tremendously beneficial in getting you out of that box you're in and start working towards your ultimate dream.
There you go. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on to the Unsealing You podcast. This is super powerful, dense, information, and I know that it's helpful for all my listeners. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. It was a pleasure.
You know that moment when you start to wonder if all your effort, all your drive, and all your constant striving might actually be working against you? There was a point in my career when I started to feel that way. I had built a reputation for getting things done, for holding everything together, for keeping the trains running no matter what. But somewhere along the way, the pace that once made me successful became a thing that was quietly burning me out. And the harder I pushed, the less I felt like myself. I was constantly yelling at people. I was too committed to everyone else's expectations, to looking like I had it all together, to being the one that can fix anything. I remember one specific week, I had just wrapped up a huge launch that required my team to stay up half the night troubleshooting issues. The project succeeded, but I felt exhausted and empty. Everybody else saw another win. I saw just how much of myself I spent holding it all together and how little energy I had left for anything else. That week, something clicked. I realized that both inside and outside of work, I was constantly reacting, trying to prove, trying to perform, and trying to keep up. But leadership isn't about reacting. It's about responding from clarity, from calm, and from self-trust. So I stopped running at other people's pace. I started pausing before saying yes. I let go of the need to have all the answers in the moment. And the funny thing is, the moment I stopped proving myself, people started listening differently. I started showing up differently. My confidence didn't come from approval anymore. It came from presence. That's why this week's episode, where we break down what happens when high-performing leaders hit that invisible wall, when they go from doing to leading and suddenly realize that they've been sprinting on fumes. But what I love most about this episode is that we don't just tell you to slow down. We show you how to do it, how to respond instead of react, how to lead instead of overfunction, how to rebuild trust in yourself and your team. You don't have to run faster to be effective. You don't have to prove your value to be valuable. And you definitely don't have to do it all to make an impact. Your calm is your authority. Your clarity is your power. And your leadership doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being more present. So take a breath. Tune in and let's talk about what it really means to lead with calm, clarity, and self-assurance without burning out or letting everything fall apart. This is UnCeiling You. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope this conversation with Walter gave you not just insights, but a sense of relief that you don't have to have every answer, you don't have to sprint your way through the day, and you don't need to lead alone. If something in this episode made you pause, reflect, or breathe a little deeper, hold on to that. That's your wisdom speaking. That's the part of you that already knows there's a calmer, clearer, more grounded way to lead. On UnCeiling You, we're here to break the patterns that keep us overwhelmed, reactive, and exhausted, and move into a version of leadership that feels intentional, steady, and rooted in self-trust. If today's episode spoke with you, share it with someone who might need it. And if you want more conversations like this, be sure to follow the show so that you don't miss the next one. Thank you for being here. Thank you for leading with heart. And remember, you're capable, you're growing, and you're not alone. I'll see you on the next episode.